In this lesson, we will take a look how we can change some settings for our footage files. Let's take a look at our brush sequence. Let's select it, and then up here you see we have some information. First of all, we see the resolution, then we see the duration, we see the frames per second, the color settings, the alpha channel, and then whether it's interlaced or non-interlaced footage. If you want to preview it, we can just double click on this item and then the preview footage dialog will open up. Maybe in your case it looks like this. Then you can toggle the transparency grid right here to make the alpha channel visible. And now you can scroll through the animation and take a look at your file. You can change these settings for individual elements by selecting it, right-clicking, and then you can choose Interprate Footage, and then you can choose Main. So let's open up this dialog box, and you see here we have a few options to change settings for our footage files. First of all, you have these alpha options. And most of the times After Effects is very good when you import a footage that it finds out the right setting for the alpha channel. In this case, it's the straight unnetted alpha channel. If you choose Ignore Alpha Channel, you see that After Effects will just ignore the alpha channel, and now everything that is transparent normally is black. You can of course also choose a pre-multiplied alpha channel, doesn't make any difference here. I know that this file has actually a straight alpha channel, and if we go to guess, so let's select ignore and then select guess, After Effects will be able to determine the right setting for the alpha channel. The next option that we have here is the frame rate. You see that After Effects assumes that this file has a frame rate of 30 frames per second. Of course, it doesn't really matter if you import a PNG sequence because these are all single images. You can specify whatever frame rate you want. So let's change this to 25 frames per second, and let's take a look here at the duration of this frame. So now the duration is 2 seconds and 15 frames. And if I change this now to 25 frames per second and click away, then you see the duration changes to 3 seconds. And this is exactly what I had in mind when I created this PNG sequence. I wanted to have a 3 seconds long animation with a frame rate of 25 frames per second. Okay. Now the next option that you have is you can specify a start time code, or you could override the start time code by typing something in here. We do not need this in our case. We also do not need to change any separate field options because we know that this is a PNG sequence with no separate fields. And you can also forget this pull down here. These are very specific settings when you're working with video footage for cinema. But another option that is quite interesting down here is the looping option. So for example, if you're working with a looping background, then you could specify some repetitions here. The standard setting is 1 loop, but if I increase this, let's say to 5, and then I click OK, you will see that now my video suddenly has a duration of 15 seconds. And if I come in here and now drag out my play area here, you see that now After Effects will automatically loop my video over and over again. This makes of course not much sense in our case with this brush stroke here. Let's toggle the transparency grid to make this a little bit more obvious. But this can be very handy if you are working with loopable elements. Now let's change this back, just that we have the right settings here. Let's go to Interpret Footage. Right click, by the way, of course, and then select Main. And I do not want to loop this, so just set this to 1 and make sure that the frame rate is set to 25 frames per second and that the alpha channel is set to straight. Let's click OK, and now the settings are fine for our brush PNG sequence. Let's take a quick look how this looks for our splatter video file. So double click this to open it up in our preview video, and now we can also right click, go to Interpret Footage, Main, and you see that the settings are very similar. The only difference is that this file actually has a pre-multiplied alpha channel. It is already set to 25 frames per second. You see that this frame rate is already written into the file here, so After Effects uses the frame rate from the file. And the time code and everything else is okay, so we can click OK. We do not have to do any changes here. I also want to show you the options that you have for still images, like our PSD files here. Right click, choose Interpret Footage. And of course, here we have a bunch of options grayed out because an image cannot have a frame rate, cannot have a time code, and you're not able to loop it. So you basically can just change the alpha channel settings. And of course, we have color management settings also for our video files. But right now, we do not want to deal with color management. Okay, so now you know how you can change certain parameters of files that you imported to After Effects. One more hint. There is actually a preference that determines the standard frame rate for importing image sequences. We can come up here to Edit, and we already took a look at our preferences. And now let's come in here to Preferences and let's select Import. And now you see here in the sequence footage, we have the setting that the standard frame rate is 30 frames per second. And this is the reason why After Effects imported my image sequence, my PNG sequence, with a frame rate of 30 frames per second. If you know that you are working in a PAL region, so the standard frame rate is 25 frames per second, you can come in here and change this to 25. And then After Effects will always import image sequences with a frame rate of 25 frames per second. So now click OK, and these settings are changed. Good, this is it for settings of files and interpreting footage. Now let's move on with our project.